Labour's shadow chancellor John McDonnell has asked economics guru Lord Skidelsky to lead an inquiry into the impact of a four-day working week as the party seeks out radical solutions to the UK economy's problems. McDonnell has suggested Labour could include a pledge to reduce the traditional working week by a day in its manifesto at the next election. Asked directly about this last month in a BBC interview, he said, "We will see how it goes." During the interview, McDonnell pointed out that the French and the Germans produced the same in 4 days as British workers did in 5. "We will look at the working week because I think people are working too long. The idea, though, is sensitive in Labour circles, with some unsure whether such a commitment would be appropriate," says The Guardian. The TUC this year backed the switch at their annual general meeting, saying the proposal was the #1 outcome of their report into how changes to the current and future workplace can best benefit workers. This was based on a survey of its members which indicated it was the most popular option, favored by 45% of participants, with 81% wanting a reduction of at least 1 day, reports Wired. In the UK, the average working week is 35 hours, for an average salary of £27,000 a year. A recent survey by TotallyMoney.com found that 60% of British workers say they don't have a good work-life balance, and only a third of employees leave work on time. The UK is in a crisis of overwork, writes Aidan Harper in The Independent. Figures released last year show that 300,000 people leave their jobs each year because of mental health problems, at an annual estimated cost to the UK economy of up to £99 billion. In 2015-16, stress accounted for 45% of all working days lost in the UK because of ill health, government figures show. So could a 4-day working week be the answer? Is a shorter working week the answer? A report in medical journal The Lancet linked longer working hours to heart disease and stroke. Meanwhile, 6 out of 10 UK bosses believe that cutting employees' days from 8 to 6 hours could be beneficial for business, the Daily Telegraph reported last year. Many employers said they thought worker productivity would be the same whether staff worked 6 or 8 hours. Managers also favored the shorter day because they thought having more leisure time would increase employees' mental and physical well-being, improve their relationships with family and friends, boost their creativity and reduce the number of sick days taken, according to the Telegraph. Unsurprisingly, many employees say they would be happy to cut their hours. The Financial Times reports that in the first quarter of 2017, 3.3 million people in the UK wanted to work fewer hours and receive less pay, while 2.7 million favoured labouring for longer, according to data from the Office for National Statistics. At 600,000, this was the largest gap between the two categories since the second quarter of 2008, and intensifies concerns that pay is not rising sufficiently in response to high levels of employment, says the FT. What would a shorter work week look like? Germany's biggest union is pushing for a 28-hour working week, says Aidan Harper in The Independent. The union argues that workers should benefit from Germany's growing economy, in the form of better pay and an improved work-life balance. This ambitious move is entirely in line with Germany's recent history. Along with Holland, they have some of the lowest number of hours worked per year in the world, and some of the highest levels of GDP per person. Harper says, productivity, output per working hour, also improves with shorter hours, he adds, citing data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Across the world's richest countries, higher productivity correlates with lower working hours. Sweden made headlines 2 years ago when nurses in Gothenburg started working 6, rather than 8, hours a day under a city-run scheme. However, despite research showing the benefits of the shortened workdays, this February nurses at the Svartedalens elderly care facility returned to working 8-hour shifts, reports Bloomberg. City officials said the decision not to extend the experiment was due, at least in part, to lack of funding to employ extra staff to fill the gaps, yet, there are longer-term savings the study didn't take into account, Bloomberg said. Working shorter hours resulted in healthier workers. They were less tired, less sick, had more energy coming home and more time to do activities. Specifically, the nurses took fewer sick days than they did when working 8-hour shifts. According to Dr. K. Anders Ericsson, an expert in the psychology of work, people are only able to be productive for a few hours at a time. Toward the end of the day, he says, performance begins to flatline, or worse, if you're pushing people well beyond that time, they can really concentrate maximally, you're very likely to get them to acquire some bad habits, Ericsson told Business Insider. The pros and cons of fewer hoursless work doesn't just equate to better health and productivity. Countries with short work weeks consistently top gender equality rankings, says Rutger Bregman, author of Utopia for Realists. On Quartz, the central issue is achieving a more equitable distribution of work, he says. Not until men do their fair share of cooking, cleaning and other domestic labor will women be free to fully participate in the broader economy. One of the most difficult aspects of a shortened working week is the issue of pay. In order to allow workers to maintain their lifestyles while working less, staff would either all have to be on a universal basic salary, or the hourly wage would need to be raised. Plus, any company switching to a 4-day week might find it difficult to deal with other businesses if it were closed during many standard working hours. Perhaps the biggest obstacle is cultural, rooted in the Lutheran work ethic and our self-valuation according to how hard we strive. It is challenging to tackle such deep-rooted social and personal norms, says Anna Thomas in The Guardian. And for some, there is also the old adage that the devil makes work for idle hands.